There's a side of every man that rarely meets the daylight. It hides behind confidence, humor, and the illusion of control. It shows itself not in conversation, but in stillness, in the quiet moments before sleep, in the wordless space between two people lying close. Carl Jung called this hidden dimension the shadow, the part of the psyche that carries all the emotions we deny, repress, or fear. And nowhere is that shadow more alive than in intimacy. When a man lies beside someone, stripped of pretense and performance, what remains isn't just physical presence. It's the psyche, unclothed and unguarded. In that rare stillness, the truth of his emotions leaks through. The tension in his breath, the distance in his gaze, the warmth of his touch. Jung believed that moments of intimacy awaken what's been buried, because the unconscious, when given silence, finally begins to speak. Jung saw the human mind as a balance of opposites. Every man carries both light and darkness, logic and emotion, strength and tenderness. But the modern world trains men to live only on one side of this equation. Society rewards composure, control, and stoicism. The rest, fear, need, and sensitivity, is quietly exiled into the unconscious. Yet what's buried never dies. It waits and it returns. In intimacy, those hidden emotions rise to the surface. The bed becomes more than a place of rest. It becomes a psychological mirror. What a man hides in public, he reveals here, not through words, but through subtle emotional signals. His shadow comes to life. One of the most common emotions buried in the male psyche is fear. Beneath the confident mask, many men carry a quiet dread, the fear of inadequacy. It's not only about performance or masculinity, but about emotional worth. The fear that he isn't enough to be loved without conditions. Jung called this tension the persona wound, the pain of mistaking one's social mask for one's true self. The persona is the version of us built to please the world. Men build theirs carefully, dependable, strong, unaffected. But when the mask slips, in moments of closeness, the unfiltered self emerges. The part that doubts, hesitates, and aches to be accepted. To Jung, this confrontation with the self is sacred. It's uncomfortable, but necessary. The fear is not weakness. It's the psyche trying to reconcile truth with illusion. Yet fear rarely presents itself openly. Most men don't say, "I am afraid." Instead, they withdraw, joke, or distract. Humor becomes armor. Silence becomes safety. The body may be present, but the emotions remain guarded. This is how the shadow protects itself. Jung would say the man is projecting, turning inner anxiety into outer behaviors that disguise it. He hides behind gestures, not realizing the mask is slipping in another way. The next hidden emotion is shame. It's quieter than fear, but heavier. Shame tells a man that there is something wrong with who he is, not what he did, but what he is. From childhood, many men are taught that tenderness is weakness, tears are disgraceful, and vulnerability is unmanly. Over years, this becomes internalized, so when they finally experience genuine closeness, the act of being emotionally seen feels like exposure to danger. In Jungian language, shame belongs to the shadow, because it represents everything the ego refuses to claim. To feel shame is to glimpse the parts of oneself deemed unacceptable by culture or upbringing. A man may long to express love freely, but feel an instinctive pull to hide it. He may crave emotional safety, yet interpret it as loss of control. The result is confusion, affection mixed with hesitation, desire entangled with restraint. Jung believed that the only way to heal shame is through awareness, to shine light on it without judgment. When a man can look at his shame and say, "This too is me," he begins what Jung called individuation, the integration of the unconscious self. But most men never reach that stage. Instead, they carry their shame like invisible armor. It keeps them protected, but also distant. Another emotion men secretly hide in bed is grief. Often unrecognized, it lingers beneath the surface of connection. It may be grief for lost time, lost innocence, failed love, or unfulfilled potential. Jung saw grief as the soul's way of acknowledging impermanence. But because society rarely gives men permission to grieve, the emotion mutates. It turns into numbness, distraction, or detachment. In intimacy, grief appears as quiet distance. A feeling that the man is half present, lost in a place memory cannot name. Then there is the longing to be understood. Jung's theory of the anima, the inner feminine aspect of a man's psyche, reveals why this desire is so profound. The anima embodies sensitivity, emotional depth, and creativity. When suppressed, it becomes a haunting presence, a silent craving for emotional connection that no physical act can satisfy. Men often project this anima onto their partners, expecting them to fulfill an inner void. But what they truly seek is reconciliation with their own emotional nature. The anima, when unintegrated, turns intimacy into projection. A man begins to confuse closeness with completion. He may feel drawn to someone not because of who they are, but because they mirror what he has lost within himself. Jung warned that this dynamic can trap people in cycles of dependency. To love authentically, a man must first accept his own emotional self, to make peace with the anima rather than outsource it. Hidden beneath these layers lies the fear of surrender. For many men, letting go, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, feels like losing control. Yet Jung saw surrender as the doorway to transformation. True intimacy demands trust, and trust demands vulnerability. But vulnerability is precisely what the ego resists. It equates surrender with danger. So even when love is present, the psyche holds back. The body may yield, but the heart remains guarded. This resistance has roots in archetypal psychology. Jung described the hero archetype, the inner warrior that strives for conquest and mastery. Every man carries it, but when unbalanced, it dominates. The hero cannot rest. He fears dependence. In bed, this archetype may manifest as the need to lead, to impress, to remain invulnerable. Yet beneath the hero lies exhaustion, the deep, unspoken wish to simply be held without expectation. Jung believed that maturity begins when the hero meets the self, when the drive for conquest transforms into the capacity for surrender. This shift marks the birth of authenticity. But reaching that point requires confronting the shadow and acknowledging one's emotional dependency, something most men are conditioned to avoid. Another layer Jung explored is projection, the tendency to see in others what we deny in ourselves. In intimacy, projection is magnified. A man might accuse his partner of being distant when, in truth, it is his own avoidance he feels. He might see emotional intensity as too much, not realizing it mirrors his own suppressed feeling. Projection keeps him safe from self-awareness, but also perpetuates misunderstanding. Jung's cure for projection was awareness through reflection. The next time a strong emotional reaction arises, ask, "What part of me is this reflecting?" This practice transforms relationships into mirrors of growth rather than battlefields of blame. Beyond fear and shame lies something subtler, tenderness. Many men hide tenderness not because they lack it, but because they don't trust it. In a world that equates strength with hardness, gentleness feels foreign. Yet tenderness is the essence of the integrated masculine, strength guided by compassion. Jung would call this the emergence of the wise old man archetype, the aspect of the psyche that balances power with empathy. When a man dares to show tenderness, he bridges the gap between his conscious identity and his soul. In those rare moments of openness, the psyche breathes. But because tenderness feels unfamiliar, it often comes with hesitation. Some men pull back the instant they feel emotionally close, fearing the loss of composure. This oscillation, the push and pull between vulnerability and retreat, is the dance of the ego and the self. Then there is silence, perhaps the most misunderstood emotion of all. When a man grows silent in moments of closeness, it doesn't always mean disinterest. Sometimes, silence is where his unspoken emotions gather. Jung said the unconscious speaks in symbols, not sentences. Silence is one of those symbols. It can mean reflection, overwhelm, or even reverence. Learning to read silence with empathy rather than insecurity is key to understanding the masculine psyche. What men secretly hide, above all, is the longing to be accepted without performance. Behind every mask, every act of control, lies a simple desire to be loved for the unguarded self. But this longing is buried beneath layers of conditioning. Jung called this the tragedy of the modern man, to be admired for the mask while starving beneath it. The path to healing, he believed, begins with recognizing that authenticity and vulnerability are not opposites of strength, but its purest form. In Jungian therapy, the goal is not to destroy the shadow, but to integrate it. When a man learns to make peace with his hidden emotions, they stop ruling him from the dark. His fear becomes awareness, his shame becomes compassion, and his silence becomes presence. Intimacy transforms from performance into communion. Men who appear emotionally distant are often not heartless, but overwhelmed by what lies within. The masculine psyche, shaped by centuries of expectation, carries both pride and pain. Jung saw this as a necessary stage of evolution, humanity learning to balance its inner opposites. Every man who begins to understand his emotional world contributes, in his own quiet way, to that evolution. When a man finally looks inward and says, "These feelings belong to me," something sacred happens. The shadow no longer hides, it becomes his teacher. Fear becomes honesty, desire becomes devotion, and love, instead of being a battle for control, becomes a mirror of self-acceptance. So what does Carl Jung ultimately expose about men's hidden emotions in bed? He shows that beneath every act of control lies a yearning for surrender. Beneath confidence lies the child longing for safety. Beneath silence lies emotion waiting to be named. And beneath the fear of being seen lies the deepest wish, to be truly known. Jung's insight was never meant to shame men, but to free them. To show that what they hide is not weakness, but humanity. The journey inward, though frightening, is the only path to wholeness. Because the man who can face his inner world without denial becomes capable of a love that is neither performative nor dependent. He becomes whole, not by erasing his shadow, but by embracing it. When the lights go out and the world fades away, every man meets himself. Not the persona, not the role, but the raw consciousness beneath. Some turn away from that reflection. Others begin to listen. Those who listen discover something extraordinary, that the emotions they've spent years hiding are not enemies, but allies. They are guides leading them back to authenticity. Jung once wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The darkness he spoke of is not evil, it is the unacknowledged part of the soul. And in the privacy of intimacy, that darkness speaks most clearly. Men who dare to listen to that voice, to feel fear, shame, longing, and tenderness without resistance, begin the real work of individuation. They learn that strength is not the absence of feeling, but the ability to face it without flinching. They learn that surrender is not defeat, but union with the deeper self. And they learn that love is not found in hiding, but in honest presence. So perhaps the secret that Carl Jung exposes is this: what men hide emotionally in bed is not something to be ashamed of. It is the door to their wholeness. Behind every guarded heart is a soul longing to be seen. Behind every silence is an untold story. And behind every shadow, there is light waiting to return.